There are moments in life when your voice goes unheard, when your prayers seem unanswered, when the silence from heaven feels deafening. But let me tell you something. Silence is not weakness. Silence is not absence. And silence is never defeat. There's a strength that speaks without noise, a power that moves without drama, a force that fights battles in the unseen realm the world watches nothing happen. But make no mistake, just because you're silent doesn't mean you're not strong. The enemy wants you to think that your quiet obedience is wasted, that your humble faith is invisible, that if you're not loud, you're not effective. But the truth is, God does some of his greatest work in the quiet, in the hidden, in the secret place. And when you walk with him, you don't need to scream to shake the earth. You just need to stand still and let him roar. The world doesn't understand silence. It misinterprets it, mocks it, and mistakes it for weakness. But those of us who walk with God know better. We understand that silence can be sacred, that it's not an absence of strength. It's the presence of restraint, the presence of trust, the presence of something bigger moving behind the scenes. You don't always have to be loud to be effective. You don't have to shout to show you're standing. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay silent in the face of noise and keep walking in obedience when it would be easier to react in flesh. There's a kind of silence that's rooted in confidence, not in yourself, but in the one who fights for you. A silence that says, I don't have to speak because I already know the outcome. I don't have to defend myself because I'm already covered. You may not have the last word in the conversation, but you trust that God will have the final say in the story. You're not ignoring the battle. You're just choosing your weapon. And silence, when it's led by the Spirit, is a weapon hell cannot comprehend, because the enemy knows how to fight loud people. He knows how to stir up those who can't control their tongue, who can't sit still, who have to explain themselves every time they're misunderstood. But he doesn't know what to do with someone who remains unshaken, who stays rooted, who doesn't need to scream their value because they already know who they are. That kind of silence confuses the adversary. That kind of silence disrupts the atmosphere. It doesn't back down. It just doesn't bow to the need for approval. Your silence is not weakness. It's warfare. Every time you choose not to retaliate, not to clap back, not to gossip in return, you're fighting a battle you don't even see. You're choosing alignment with heaven over applause from people. And every time you do, you place a demand on the supernatural. You say, Lord, I trust you more than I trust myself. You declare, this battle is not mine, it belongs to you. There's a weight that silence carries, a holy, reverent weight that says, I will not act until God moves. I will not speak until he releases me to. I will not try to vindicate myself when my assignment is to stay hidden and pray. And make no mistake, there is power in hidden places. There is power in silence soaked in prayer, in worship, in surrender. Power that doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. Think about the Israelites when they circled Jericho. For 6 days, they walked in silence. Not a word, not a shout, just obedience, just faith, just trust. And on the 7th day, when God said, now shout, their silence turned into a sound that shook the walls. But the power wasn't just in the shout. It was in the days of quiet trust that came before. It was in the discipline of walking without seeing results, believing without hearing confirmation, obeying without evidence. And that's where many give up. In the silent days, in the quiet moments when nothing seems to be changing. But those are the days when strength is forged, when your silence becomes louder than any word you could speak, because it tells the enemy that you will not be moved. It tells the world that your trust is not circumstantial. And it tells heaven that you're ready for more, that you can be trusted with silence, that you don't need validation to keep believing. You see, when your silence is born of intimacy with God, it becomes a roar in the spirit. When you stop fighting battles with your mouth and start warring on your knees, the earth may see silence, but the heavens hear thunder. The enemy may think you're quiet, but you're declaring war in the unseen. Every time you say, I'll let God handle it, you're stepping into a realm where divine intervention takes over human reaction, where angels are assigned and justice begins to flow from the throne. So don't be discouraged when you feel unseen. Don't be disheartened when you're overlooked. Don't think for a second that your silence has no voice, because God is recording every moment. He is storing every tear. He is counting every step of obedience. And when the time is right, when the preparation is done, when the silence has done its work, he will open the door no one can shut. He will speak a word no man can silence. He will lift you in a way that doesn't need explanation, because your elevation will be evidence enough. That's why you can stand in rooms where your name isn't mentioned and still walk like you belong. That's why you can serve without credit and still hold her head high, because your reward isn't coming from man. It's coming from the one who saw you in the secret place. And when he rewards, he does it publicly, but only after he sees if you can be faithful in silence. Only after he tests your heart when no one's watching. Only after he proves that your strength doesn't need a spotlight. There is a depth to those who have learned to be silent but strong. A maturity that doesn't flinch at rejection, a power that doesn't need revenge, a grace that flows from having walked through fires with lips sealed but spirits ablaze. You don't have to respond to every attack. You don't have to answer every critic. You don't have to correct every lie. When you are anchored in the truth, silence becomes your sanctuary and strength becomes your song. And when you stand like that, when you choose faith over noise, God responds. Heaven backs you up. Because he knows that a person who can hold their tongue in pressure can carry his glory in power. He knows that a person who doesn't need to be seen can be trusted to lead. He knows that a soul that finds strength in silence is a soul that can carry his voice. And that's what the enemy fears. Not just your praise, it's your scripture. He fears your quiet obedience. He fears your silent submission. He fears your unshakable stillness. Because that's the kind of faith that moves mountains without making a sound. That's the kind of spirit that shifts generations without a platform. That's the kind of heart that makes hell tremble without ever raising its voice. It's not just about keeping quiet. It's about where your quiet takes you. It takes you to the throne room. It takes you to the secret place. It takes you into alignment with divine strategy. While others are wasting energy trying to be heard, you're receiving instructions from heaven. While others are exhausting themselves trying to be validated, you're being filled with a power that needs no introduction. That's the strength of silence. And when your faith grows in the quiet, everything changes. You start to recognize God's voice more clearly. You start to move not by impulse, but by instruction. You start to walk in emotion, but in authority, because your silence has created space for clarity. It has created room for wisdom. It has made your heart sensitive to the whispers of heaven. And that's when you realize you've never been stronger. Not when you were yelling, not when you were explaining, but when you were still, when you were trusting, when you were silent. Because there are victories that can't be won by sound, only by surrender. There are battles that don't require volume. Just vision. There are breakthroughs that come not by force, but by faith. And if you're willing to walk through silence, you will walk into strength. Strength the world can't give and the enemy can't take. Strength that comes from knowing you don't have to fight for position when you're already seated with Christ in heavenly places. So when the silence surrounds you, don't run from it. Lean into it. Let it mold you. Let it sharpen you. Because silence is not your enemy. It's your weapon. When wielded in faith, it's unstoppable. And when you lift up a prayer in that silence, don't doubt its power, because the prayers prayed in pain, in weakness, in weariness, those are the ones that rise straight to the throne. The ones without eloquence, without long words, without theatrics. The simple, help me, prayed through tears is more potent than 1,000 memorized speeches. Heaven hears your whisper. Hell fears your whisper. Because when your whisper carries the name of Jesus, it becomes a war cry. And that's why your silence matters, because your silence is not empty. It's full of faith. It's full of purpose. It's full of fire. And when it's offered to God, it becomes the stage for his glory. So stand still, be silent. But no, you are anything but weak. You are silent, but you are strong. There is a sacred power in the quiet place. The kind of power that doesn't come from platforms or applause, but from surrender. The place where you don't perform, you don't impress, and you don't pretend. It's just you and God. The quiet place is not about absence. It's about presence. It's the inner chamber where your strength is born, your authority is forged, your identity is secured. Your enemy will try to convince you that if no one sees you, then you must not be valuable. But that's a lie, because what heaven treasures the most is what it develops in secret. Public power is the fruit, but the root is always grown in silence. You don't step onto the battlefield to find your strength. You bring it with you, cultivated from countless unseen hours in the presence of the Most High. There's a reason Jesus slipped away to quiet places, not because he lacked boldness, but because he knew where true boldness begins. He didn't need crowds to confirm his calling. He didn't require constant movement to validate his mission. He understood the holy necessity of stillness. He would withdraw often into silence, because he knew that real strength isn't sustained by the noise of the world, but by the voice of the Father. If the Son of God needed the quiet, how much more do we? The quiet place is not punishment. It's preparation. It's not isolation. It's invitation. It is God saying, come away with me and I will make you into who you were created to be. You can be on stages and still be empty. You can have thousands listen to your voice and still be dry inside. But you cannot be in the secret place and remain unchanged. Something happens in the stillness that you can't get anywhere else. The word becomes alive. The whispers become loud. The spirit becomes tangible. You begin to see yourself the way God sees you, not through the lens of public perception, but through the gaze of eternal love. And in that place, he heals wounds you didn't even know were open. He addresses fears you've been hiding. He deals with the motives you pretend don't exist. He strengthens your core, not just for where you are, but for where he's taking you. The quiet place is the training ground of the called. It's where your spirit is disciplined to obey without delay, to listen without distraction, to trust without evidence. In the quiet, you learn that God's voice doesn't always come in fire or thunder. It often comes in a whisper. And only those who have quieted their souls can hear it. You realize that stillness is not an activity, it's intentional warfare. Because while you sit in silence, your faith is roaring in the heavens. While you meditate on his word, your roots are digging deep into the soil of truth. And those roots will anchor you when the winds of life try to shake you. They'll hold you steady when storms try to pull you off course. They'll remind you who you are when the enemy tries to confuse your identity. The world teaches hustle, noise, and visibility, but the kingdom teaches hiddenness, stillness, and preparation. The world says, get seen to be significant. But heaven says, get alone with me to be significant. Because in the quiet, God isn't just changing your direction. He's transforming your nature. He's making sure that when you rise, you'll rise in humility. That when you speak, you'll speak with authority. That when you lead, you'll lead with purity. And the only place that kind of transformation can happen is in the quiet. It's not glamorous. It's not flashy, but it is holy. And there's something else about the quiet place. It breaks the need for applause. It severs the addiction to affirmation. It teaches you to be content when no one notices because you've already been noticed by the one who matters most. It teaches you to serve in the background, to power out in the hidden, to love without recognition. And in doing so, it creates in you the character to carry the weight of your calling. Because a crown without character is a curse, and favor without foundation will crumble. So God, in his mercy, hides you, not to punish you, but to protect you. He hides you in the quiet so he can build something in you that won't break when the pressure comes. So if you find yourself in a season of silence, don't resist it. Embrace it. Lean in. Let God do the work in the unseen. Let him carve away everything that doesn't belong. Let him purify your motives. Let him strengthen your resolve. Because the quiet place is where giants are formed, where warriors are equipped, where vessels are prepared for glory. And when the time comes and he calls you out of hiding, you'll come forth not as a novice, but as one who has been with God. You won't need to prove yourself. The oil will speak. The fruit will show. The power will confirm that you have been trained in silence. And sometimes in that silence, you'll feel overlooked. You'll wonder if anyone sees the sacrifices, the prayers, the obedience you offer behind closed doors. But you must remember, God sees, and he doesn't waste anything. Every moment in the quiet is being used. Every prayer is being stored. Every tear is being caught. You are not forgotten. You are being formed. And when God is done forming you, no man can stop what he does next, because what's been prepared in the quiet will always carry a depth that noise can't replicate. There are moments in life when being overlooked is not a coincidence. It's a covering. God is keeping you hidden on purpose, not because you're not ready to be used, but because he's still writing something deeper in you. And if you let him, he'll use this hidden season to build something that lasts. He'll teach you to be content with being unseen. He'll show you how to find joy in serving without credit. He'll reveal that significance isn't about being known. It's about being obedient. Being overlooked doesn't feel good. It stings when others are celebrated while you are invisible. It hurts when you serve faithfully and no one acknowledges it. But you must understand this truth. Promotion doesn't come from people. It comes from God. And when it's your time, no man can hold you back. But until then, don't despise the hidden place. Because that's where God is refining your heart, stretching your faith, and testing your integrity. He's asking, can you serve without recognition? Can you keep going without applause? You would. Can you remain faithful when it feels unfair? Because those who can stay faithful in obscurity are the ones he can trust with influence. Those who stay grounded in humility while being overlooked are the ones he will raise up with authority, because he knows they won't chase approval. They'll chase him. And in those seasons where your name is not mentioned, your work is not seen, and your voice is not heard, don't lose heart. You are not invisible to heaven. The one who called you sees it all. He's watching how you handle the silence. He's watching how you respond when others get what you prayed for. He's watching your attitude, your heart, your worship, because how you wait matters. How you endure the hidden seasons matters. That's where your roots go deep. That's where your character is tested. That's where your strength is born. The ones who make the biggest impact in the world are not always the loudest. Sometimes they're the ones who have learned to thrive in silence. They've learned to trust when nothing makes sense, to obey when there's no affirmation, to worship when there's no spotlight. They've learned that their value isn't based on their visibility. It's based on their identity in God. And because of that, they become unshakable. They don't need platforms to prove their worth. They don't need praise to keep going. They know who they are. And they've learned that being hidden is not a curse. It's a calling. So if you're walking through a quiet season right now, where it feels like everyone else is moving ahead and you're stuck in stillness, know this: God is not delaying you. He's developing you. He's pulling out of you what's been buried. He's sharpening your discernment. He's aligning your steps. He's making sure that when you step into what he has for you, you'll be ready, not just gifted, but grounded. Not just visible, but valuable. Not just celebrated, but sanctified. He's building you from the inside out, because the quiet place is not just where your strength is formed. It's where your future is shaped, where your calling is clarified, where your intimacy with God becomes unbreakable. And when you come out of the quiet, you won't just carry knowledge, you'll carry presence. You won't just have a voice, you'll have power. You won't just be seen, you'll be sent by God, empowered by the Spirit, ready for whatever lies ahead. And that's why the quiet matters. That's why being hidden matters. Because what God builds in silence, no storm can destroy. There comes a moment in your journey when your voice, your defense, your argument, your reasoning, all of it must be laid down. Not because you don't have something to say, you would, not because you haven't been wronged, not because the weight of misunderstanding hasn't left its mark on you, but because you've reached a place in your faith where you trust the one who speaks for you better than you ever could. That place of surrender where you no longer carry the burden of self-protection, because you've handed the microphone over to the God who sees, who hears, who knows, and who never loses a battle. It's not a weakness to be quiet in the face of accusation. It's not cowardice to be still when you're messaged. It is strength, divine and holy, to say nothing and let the one who justifies take over the courtroom of life. You were never meant to carry the weight of proving your worth to people. You were never intended to chase after validation or vindication. The pressure to explain yourself can be suffocating, but there's freedom in realizing you don't have to. When you step back and let God step forward, you're acknowledging a higher authority. In the place that you would, you're declaring that your name doesn't need to be cleared by human hands because it's already written in heaven's book. Your dignity doesn't come from popular opinion. It flows from the one who crafted you in secret and anointed you in silence. Sometimes the greatest faith is not in the words you speak, but in the silence you keep. When you're tempted to argue, to clap back, to set the record straight, and instead you bow your head and whisper, "Lord, you see." That whisper becomes a roar in heaven. That restraint becomes a weapon in the spirit. That silence becomes the soil where God plants justice. And his justice never comes late. It doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to prove. It just moves with power when the time is right. You don't need to be loud to be heard in heaven. You don't need to be seen to be known by God. When you let him speak for you, he doesn't just silence your critics. He prepares a table for you in their presence. He elevates you in the very places where you were once ignored. He blesses you in ways that explanations could never accomplish. Because when he speaks, it settles the issue. When he defends, no accusation can stand. When he moves, no opposition can block it. It's easy to want to take matters into your own hands. It's human to want to be understood. But spiritual maturity looks like silence in moments that beg for noise. It looks like peace when chaos is expected. It looks like confidence when you have no evidence, but you trust the judge is still seated on the throne. And he has never ruled unjustly. Not once. So when you let him speak for you, you are not forfeiting the fight. You are choosing the victory. Letting God speak doesn't mean you do nothing. It means your actions are different. You go to war in worship. You fight with your faith. You enter the courtroom of heaven, not with a defense, but with dependence. And when heaven rules in your favor, it's undeniable. Because what he says carries weight, and when he speaks, what was bound gets loosed, what was hidden gets revealed, what was against you turns in your favor. The beauty of his voice is that it doesn't just settle scores. It brings healing. It doesn't just silence enemies. It restores peace to your heart. Because when you try to fight every battle on your own, even if you win, you're left exhausted. But when God fights for you, you come out of the fire not even smelling like smoke. You come out whole, elevated, and stronger than before because you trusted his timing, his method, his justice. You're not giving up by being silent. You're growing up. You're not letting people get away with it. You're letting God deal with them his way. And his way is always better because he sees what you don't. He knows the hearts involved. He knows the pain behind the mask. And when he speaks, it's not just about judgment, it's about redemption. He redeems the pain. He redeems the silence. He redeems the misunderstanding. And you come out of it with a testimony that only he could write. Sometimes what God wants from you is not your voice. It's your trust. He wants to know that when you can't explain, you'll still obey. When you can't be heard, you'll still be faithful. When you can't control the outcome, you'll still believe that he's working. That kind of faith is rare. It's powerful. It's the kind of faith that moves mountains quietly, that shifts atmospheres without noise, that changes generations without applause. And it's the kind of faith the enemy fears most because he doesn't know how to handle restraint. He knows how to deal with chaos, but he doesn't know what to do with calm. He knows how to provoke flesh, but he's confused when he meets a spirit that's anchored. So when you choose silence, when you let God speak, you don't just avoid a fight. You win it. You claim a victory that's bigger than a moment. You secure a legacy that's built on the foundation of trust. And that trust doesn't just show up in silence. It shows up in restraint. It shows up when your spirit is calm, even when your flesh wants to react. It shows up when you have every reason to retaliate, but you choose to forgive. It shows up when you could push your way forward, but you choose to wait for his timing. That's not weakness. That's power under control. That's strength wrapped in grace. That's authority born in intimacy with God. There's a level of maturity where you realize that not everything deserves your reaction. Not every comment needs a response. Not every door needs to be kicked open. Because when you know your identity, you stop striving for validation. When you're secure in your calling, you stop chasing opportunities. When you're filled with the Spirit, you stop being led by your emotions. And that kind of restraint is not natural. It's supernatural. It's not easy to hold back when everything in you wants to react. But the same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead lives in you. And he empowers you to be different, to be holy, to be set apart. He gives you the strength to pause, to wait, to yield. And in that pause, he works. In that pause, he speaks. In that pause, he performs miracles that no amount of striving could ever produce. The enemy wants you to think that if you don't move, nothing will happen. But the truth is, some of the most powerful moves of God come after seasons of restraint, after seasons where you didn't act, but you trusted, where you didn't fight, but you prayed, where you didn't manipulate, but you surrendered. And when he moves, it makes up for every moment you stayed still, because he redeems time, he restores opportunities, he renews what was lost. You don't have to push your way to the front when God has already reserved your seat. You don't have to prove your value when the cross already did. You don't have to scream your purpose when heaven has already spoken it over you. Restraint is not passive. It's powerful. It's you saying, I don't need to react because I've already been redeemed. It's you declaring, I won't be led by my feelings. I'll be led by the Spirit. And when you live like that, the enemy loses every time because he can't defeat someone who doesn't need control. He can't manipulate someone who's yielded. He can't derail someone who waits on God. That kind of person is dangerous to the kingdom of darkness. That kind of person is a weapon in the hand of God because their strength isn't dependent on the moment. It's anchored in eternity. Restraint is not about weakness. It's about wisdom. It's about knowing when to speak and when to be silent, when to act and when to wait, when to move and when to stay still. And that kind of wisdom comes from intimacy with God, from listening before you act, from discerning before you decide, from abiding before you advance. And that's what makes you effective. Not your volume, but your vision. Not your reaction, but your revelation. So if you find yourself in a moment where everything in you wants to move, but God says, wait, Trust him. If your heart wants to fight back, but the Spirit says, be still, obey. If your emotions are raging, but his voice says, let me handle it, surrender. Because in that surrender is power. In that surrender is victory. In that surrender is the life you were always meant to live, not by fear, not controlled by pride, not driven by insecurity, but anchored in peace, filled with power, and led by truth. You are not weak because you didn't react. You are invisible because you chose silence. You are not losing because you chose restraint. You are walking in divine strength. You are trusting your defender. You are following the whisper instead of the wind, and in due time, the fruit of that choice will speak for itself. God will honor the silence. He will bless the restraint. And you will see once again that his ways are higher, his timing is perfect, and his justice is unmatched.